Welcome back to Open Line tonight. Thank you so much for joining us as we reset here at the half hour. I want to reintroduce our guest and our topic. Chris Sanders, the Executive Director of the Tennessee Equality Project, is joining us tonight. Chris, it's always good to see you. And our topic tonight, though we are going to veer off a little bit on this, but I want to invite callers to call in. But our topic tonight, should student athletes be forced to play sports based on their assigned gender at birth? And we are talking about this because it's being discussed amongst our state lawmakers right now. A bill is being proposed with this very topic in mind. So we're going to get to that, but first we have Lucy on the line. Good evening, Lucy. Thank you for being with us.
Hey, y'all.
Hi, go ahead.
Hey, Mr. Sanders. I'm going to try to be respectful as possible, and I'm not trying to be silly about this, because I've known decades ago people who were trying to go through the transition. Some of them were drag queens, and that was the only way that they felt comfortable in their skin, is to and legally they could kind of dress that way and be themselves. And some of the drag queens that I've known, especially the earlier ones, wore mustaches. So you know, I think a lot of people really still haven't got their head around what transsexuals are, or transgenders. And I think it's confusing for most people. When I was in high school, we weren't allowed as girls to play full court basketball. We just weren't allowed. And me and a friend of mine who was male, we got on the court with some college players about 20 years after we got out of high school, and they mowed us down. So, and they played full court. So we thought, since we played street ball, that we were better than them, and they were professional athletes. My question is, I have a family member that had a child that was born, I don't know the appropriate term, I don't want to botch up saying it, with ambiguous sexual genitalia. And when the medical community assigned her sex for her at birth, when she got older, she was male, and she got very angry with her family, very angry at the world, and very angry because she felt that she was male. How is the state of Tennessee going to handle people that are born with ambiguous sexual organs? Are they going to decide for them who they can compete with and who they can't? What if they decide they want to be female in high school and they're playing, you know, with both genitalia, so to speak? You understand my question? Can you address that? I don't mean to beat this to death.
Sure.
But could you address that? I'll take your answer offline.
Thank you, Lucy.
Yeah, what the caller is talking about is intersex people. And what often happens is that someone is assigned a certain sex at birth. And unfortunately, there are some medical interventions then to try to correct genitalia, and you know, it can go very wrong, because down the road, one's internal sense of oneself can be a different gender than what was assigned at birth. But on your forever original birth certificate, it says female or it says male. But you come to a realization that you are a different gender down the road as an intersex person. So this bill would affect intersex people as well. Absolutely, it would. This would be a case of the state deciding for you, because the state is basing this law on what's on the original birth certificate. There's no appeal. There's no plea to be made. They're sticking you with whatever is on your original birth certificate forever.
I think that will answer Lucy's question. Unfortunately, it doesn't do much for sorting out what needs to be done. Oh, good. We almost lost you there, but you're back. Okay. I did want to ask you, Chris, President Biden, in the short time that he's been in office, has issued an executive order which bars gender discrimination, denying students access to school sports based on their gender identity. That's pretty clear. So if that executive order has been made, what effect would it have on this law here in Tennessee if it passes, or this bill in Tennessee if it passes and becomes law?
Sure. Well, the executive order and the language used to introduce it are a little bit different. He did talk about school sports and the comments about it, but the executive order itself does not directly have a direct line to, school sports. It has an indirect line to it. What the president is saying is that executive agencies are to review their policies and make sure they're in line with last summer's Bostock decision in the Supreme Court, which was about job discrimination, but said that sex in federal law means it also includes sexual orientation and gender identity. So the Biden administration is looking at this as a sort of anchor for how to ground its policies towards LGBTQ people. And we believe it will have an effect on school sports eventually, but it is not a direct line. It's not a direct order that gets inclusion for transgender students into sports. Now, that said, I think it was back in August, Idaho's law barring trans athletes from participating in school sports was struck down. So, given that previous court ruling, the Biden administration's efforts to get all of its agencies to review their application of the Bostock decision and the way they interpret sex in the law and so forth, I think what Tennessee is setting ourselves up for is clearly a lawsuit and the possibility of not only losing in court, but having the threat of federal funds withheld.
As we're discussing this, another thought came to mind, and I'm wondering if you could speak about this, of just the effect on the transgender community when it comes to the constant tug of war of these issues on the federal level, state level. I'm thinking of the back and forth of the transgender people being allowed in the military that we've seen, depending on the presidential administration. What does that do to the community?
Well, what I notice is that it is incredibly frightening and depressing and enraging for people to be the object of the law as opposed to agents in changing the law. When the law is being used to punish you, it's degrading, it's demoralizing, and it makes you fearful. Suicide rates are higher among transgender people, not because they're trans, but because of all the societal discrimination that comes. There's nothing inherent in being trans that makes you more likely to take your life. It is what society does to trans people. In the LGBTQ community, there are more addiction issues because addiction can start out as a coping mechanism for societal discrimination. But as we know, addiction takes many awful turns after the coping is no longer working. And, I know in the wider community, non-LGBTQ people struggle with addiction, depression, etc. But it's more concentrated when you add societal discrimination on top of the normal stresses and strains of life. So that long answer to your question is, what effect does it have when you're the object of bad laws? It's extremely demoralizing, and it makes everything in life a little bit worse.
This is Open Line. We continue to take your calls on our main topic tonight, which is should student athletes have to play in the sport, in the gender sport of their assigned gender at birth? That's the topic. Feel free to call in 615-737+. But I do want to ask you, Chris, there are other bills that are being worked on right now and introduced in our state legislature that you are watching very closely. And I would also like to talk. It deals with schools and students, some that pertain to curriculum.
Yeah, there is, for example, a bill that would notify parents if there is any kind of curriculum about sexual orientation or gender identity, and it would allow the parents to opt their student out. There is another bill that goes further that just outright bans curriculum dealing with LGBTQ people and issues. This gets tricky, and here's why. In literature, in history, in social studies, whatever subject, in health, LGBTQ issues are part of history, are part of literature, are part of sociology, psychology, whatever study you're engaged in, we're part of it. I mean, it's hard to disentangle an entire group of people from a curriculum who have helped make the history, who have written some of our literature. So we're obviously opposed to those things, but I think however one feels about LGBTQ people, the practical matter of disentangling us from all of history and censoring content should be of concern to everybody.
And I would think that this could possibly open the door to other issues being censored.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think there's no doubt that there are parents, there are groups of people in this state who would like to censor or bracket all discussion of race. And what an important time it is for us to be talking about race and to try to make things better. But some people would rather not deal with issues and put them aside, and now we've got some legislators trying to use the law to accomplish that.
Tell me more about House Bill 233, which is also Senate Bill 562, which deals with marriage equality and certain language wrapped around that. What's happening there?
Sure. Ever since 2015, when the Supreme Court handed down the marriage discrimination ruling that banned marriage discrimination by the states, our legislature has tried to find a way to undo that. And there have been bills that would try to roll back marriage equality in Tennessee ever since that time. This bill is probably a caption bill, and a caption bill simply means it's got some starter language, but it will be filled in later. In caption bills, that's inside baseball, but it's a common practice in the legislature. You either don't have the full bill ready, or you're trying to hide what the full bill is. That's what caption bills allow you to do. This bill is dealing with definitions around marriage, and what we think could happen is that when they decide to run the bill, they will add an amendment that will fill in the real language. So we don't have a lot on this one yet, but let's just say I've been around the block a few times and I've seen this trick a few times before. And if there's any bill that's been filed this year that will carry anti-marriage equality language, this is the one.
Interesting. Okay, we have to take another quick break. More after this.